Got it.
Well, thanks for joining us, top M&A entrepreneurs. Today, I have a guest, Jack Stack. So the curious thing is, I met John Stack on LinkedIn. He goes by the name of Jack, which is my son's name. Stack, his last name, which is what I call my company, Stack Acquisitions. And he went to NAU, Northern Arizona University, where I did. So there's some connection there that I wanted to reach out to him. So welcome, Jack Stack.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you were, and we talked about this before, you were involved in 7 acquisitions and 1 you actually led, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And how did you get into this role? Now, tell me about this. It was more about the integration of these companies to other companies. How did you get in this role?
Well, I've always been kind of a technical leader, and then I transitioned to management. And then as part of that transition, you end up looking at the technology and fit, and therefore started getting more involved on teams to do that kind of thing. And then I guess one of my largest roles for doing assimilation turned out being more or less a roll-up of all my past experience in IT. And because of that, and because of my degree and running businesses, I tend to have a blended background that was well suited for all the touch points for an assimilation.
Yeah. So let me ask you about this integration. Now, the CEO is leading the acquisitions. He acquired the company. I'm just curious, did he have input on your side? Is this a good fit, not a good fit? Kind of like a James T. Kirk asking everybody in his.
Yeah. So let's start back a little bit before that. When you're looking at an organization to buy them, you're looking for fit and finish. You're looking at synergies if it's a merger, and you're looking for opportunities. And those opportunities typically are defined as synergies, well stated, with some degree of analysis on what are the go-gets to achieve those synergies, and that then drives what due diligence. The due diligence part. And so I've been involved in the due diligence from the outside, ran due diligence projects, not only from a technological point of view, but from a business point of view as well. And so those synergies are the key drivers for assimilation, as well as, you identifying how you're going to make money out of the deal.
And so how did you come up with some kind of template and say, this is in the synergy level, this is outside, and there's a gray area that, we can work with? How do you decide that?
So that's the tough part, right? I mean, you really have to go, okay, how are we going to accomplish this? Or what is a synergy? Whether or not it's a new market, whether or not there's customers that you want to have that target company actually is already doing business with. So it really depends on the key drivers, on that end up driving the due diligence. Once again, it's like, why are you getting this company? Why are you even looking at them? Well, is it a market? Is it customers? Is there industry movement, as an example, that this, the company you're looking at is hoping or moving into? And, so it's kind of very similar, I guess, to a buy versus lease model, right? When you're looking at, do I buy this or do I lease it? A lease would probably be something that you've seen an opportunity and you're going to just move into it. Whereas a buy would be an acquisition. So it's very it's got a very similar ring to it in terms of how it happens and how you look at it. At least that's my point of view. Once you get there, then you start identifying, well, can we make 15-20% in sales, and what's that chart out to in a DCF, right? you know so you end up discounting your cash flows back to see whether or not you're going to pay for that acquisition. Everything needs to be paid for, right?
Right.
And then once you have a sales price, I listened to one of the podcasts that you had where typically there's you're doing it as a gross multiplier of sales, or you're looking at net income and some kind of multiplier there, and then you kind of figure out in your DCF whether or not you can take advantage of all those synergies, right? In order to build up to make it worthwhile in terms of what your capital investment is.
Yeah. So when you guys was trying to understand, was it a lot of different CEOs that you're working for, or was it one CEO with 6 acquisitions? How did that look?
One I called one acquisition. It actually was 9 separate operating facilities, and they each had a different line of business. That was one I did from 2015 through 18 with Megit Engineering in the UK, and they had purchased 9 plants from Cobham, which was a direct competitor. You may note in the news that Megit's being purchased by Parker Hannifin for billions of dollars.
Yeah.
The Megit folks really ended up they're getting a nice little bump in their stock price from that. And I think a lot of that driver was around the Cobham acquisitions, as well as them hiring the former president of Rolls-Royce. So with that particular acquisition, I was over the technology portion of it, and the assimilation team basically reported to the board of directors. So the lead of that project reported directly to the board of directors, and then he had a team of multidisciplinary folks beneath him. I was responsible for all the technology, the entire technology footprint in all of the plants. That was from CNC machines all the way to email, and all the applications and the blending and the integration of those into Megit's system. It took 3 years to do 9 plants.
Wow.
So yeah, and a lot of travel everywhere. I had a core team there that worked for me, that was familiar with the process. There was limited due diligence in that, in terms of integration due diligence.
Let me ask you about that. Why was there a limited due diligence, especially with something with such a large acquisition price and 9?
Yeah. So the due diligence was done on the business side, in terms of market, and Megit was good at acquiring companies as a growth strategy. And so they would go into new markets or do product line infill with a player or two when they acquired. Cobham at the time was concerned on whether or not the deal would go through whatsoever. And so there was very limited information coming their way until the ink had been placed on paper. And so it was kind of like waiting for the attorneys, and that took about 4 months. And once and the first plants that we ended up getting happened the day before Thanksgiving. We did the mail integration on that on Thanksgiving Day. So we were waiting. We had done all the due diligence we could. We had moved some data that they allowed once the lawyers were confident that the deal was going to close. But then they stopped. We never visited one of the plants until the deal was consummated. At that point, then there was a service level agreement from Cobham on the backside, because systems were being migrated and they were having to maintain those systems before they were transferred over to Meggett's control.
Hold on one second. Let me pause you 1 second.
Yeah.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. So tell me, how did you get involved in that? And you're the DD guy. So what does that look like?
Well, so when you're doing any deal, you have the synergies. I'm backing up just a little bit. You've got the synergies, you've got the business objectives, great. Okay, but you still have to understand whether or not the organization you're buying has the capability of delivering on those synergies. And that's where the due diligence comes in. You want to look at systems, you want to go, what's their HR look like? What's their sales process look like? What's their marketing like? How do they actually market? Are their customers happy with them? When you're buying a company, there's no difference whether or not you're merging or just simply buying a company. If you don't know everything you can, A to Z, every single business aspect that you can think of, if you don't know that going in, you might be in for some surprises. Surprises are bad because typically they cost money, right? And they cost time, because a surprise to fix the problem takes a little bit of time, and it pushes your dates back on your synergies or whatever you're looking at as the key drivers on buying that company. So due diligence to me is one of the most important components, and not just from an assimilation point of view, but from you are going to you have the perfect right to be just a pain in the ass, hopefully not a pain in the ass, but just a pain in the ass to get the answers you need to be comfortable that that the purchase is going to be the way you intend it to be, and whether or not it accomplishes the goals that you have and the drivers for you buying it. So due diligence is critical. Cash on hand, accounts receivable, all the business basics, all of it has to be in place, or at least you have to understand it, identify the things that you can improve, identify, what kind of waste you can get rid of. All of those kinds of things are what make acquisitions and mergers. And if you identify those early on, and then start getting into the details, then you can start building a project around them for those various things that are going to either make you money or cost you money.
How do you remove the emotion? Because you want to buy a company, it's a couple $100 million, 9 plants, and it goes, oh, this is going to add life-changing wealth and stature to my record. But if you look at every area, okay, email is pretty easy. We'll just get everybody changed over email. Oh, so marketing, it's not, it's not bad. Cost of acquisition of this, so it's neutral. And maybe, in the accounting department, oh, there's duplication. We're just bringing our people. How do you use, if there's a red flag, it's a deal killer, or kind of examples like that?
Okay. First of all, if it's a red flag, let's say determine whether or not there's emotion. Okay. So you started with emotion, and a red flag to me isn't an emotional thing. It's really kind of cut and dried. What are we going to do about this? It's not about this is a showstopper until it is a showstopper, right? Meaning you're not just because there's a deficiency, just because there's, something doesn't work at the target, it doesn't mean that it's a deal killer. It means that, if you're still interested in them and the red flag is not cost prohibitive to the deal, then, you start getting an idea on how to work it out. And the best thing I can say culturally is, bringing that up with the target and saying, have you thought about this? This has been a problem for you, or this is a problem. What are you doing about it? What do you intend on doing about it? It depends on the nature of the deal. I mean, if you're leaving management in place, you're going to go, that this problem exists. What have you tried? And it might take some different thinking and you coming in and saying, no, I disagree with what you have tried. You're going to have to do it this way. Okay. So removing emotion is a key component, and that's not only with M&A, but that's just getting things done in general. You remove all the fear, uncertainty, and doubt whenever you can. And change management is a key component during, purchases and assimilations. How do you deal with the change management? Those red flags should feed into the change management process when you're buying it, when you're buying a company, because there are going to be changes. You try very hard to remove as much FUD as possible, because FUD affects profitability, it affects productivity, because people are uncertain. And when you buy a company, you don't want everybody to leave, the second you buy them. You want to retain employees for as long as you can until you know whether or not they're suited for the position. And so you remove as much FUD as possible, and you go, we're going to have to figure that out. State what you don't know. We're going to have to figure that out. We don't know yet.
How do you make those connections, synapses? Because if you don't want to lose the people, you kind of have to bring them in sooner or later to let them know what's going on. Not a shock that, hey, gosh, we're just we've got some new overlords for the United States. I'm out. Our cultures are a lot too much different.
Well, first thing is, on the smaller ones, you try to pull everyone in as quickly as possible. I when I joined IBM years ago, I had a methodology and it worked pretty well. I'd bring everybody in. I brought everybody in right away, and we went for a walk. Every single employee that worked for me, we went for a walk, and we just, I'd ask them very basic things like, why do you stay at IBM? What do you like about it? And I'll tell you a short story, which is pretty funny. One of the guys that, automatically put a target on his back. What came out of his mouth when I asked him that was, he told me that it was safe. And I'm like, safe? What do you mean? He goes, well, I've had 7 managers, and no matter, if I screw up or something, I could care less, because I know there's not going to be another manager behind him. It's like, okay, well, I'll have to keep an eye on you. And I told him that. I said, well, and I'm not sure, I don't know how to take that, but you and I are going to discuss this later, because I don't want people feeling safe. I want people feeling happy, and I want them enjoying their jobs, and safety isn't part of it. But conversely, I mean, that whole safe thing, you want to kind of let people know, we don't know what the future will bring. There's some unanswered questions. We're here to leverage, the best aspects of this organization. We want you to be one of those best aspects. And please stay and see how you like it. and we're not the thought police. Therefore, if you have some good ideas about how things should happen, or if you have questions, let us know what they are so we can address them,
Do you
and
get them
remove
to
any
sign
uncertainty.
extended contracts with them, or do they, they could quit at any time?
So that depends on the situation. With an acquisition, typically you've got a retention contract with the executives, and then that goes down to a certain level. As an example, you want all your key execs identified in the deal, of course, and those, part and parcel to that typically is they have retention contracts or retention bonuses to keep them on board. Then we go down one level, to not key employees, not the ones that are not identified in the contract. And then you have to take it on a case by case basis. And sometimes you go, for an entire department that's determined to be critical, if you stay on for 6 months, you're going to get X number of dollars. And that, by the way, should factor into your assimilation budget or your purchase deal, because there's cost after the fact, once the deal is signed.
Yeah. Is there I know you handled the IT kind of technical part of integration and simulation. Was there any red flags that just like shenanigans that you ever saw that somebody was trying to do? Well, obviously there was. I was like,
Oh boy, yeah.
well, what did those look like? I mean, how do you do that? Yeah.
Yeah, after the fact on one of the aerospace deals, not Megats, another one that I was involved in, found out that 3 of the engineers were selling engineering secrets, engineering drawings to
Holy cow! No
to
way.
competitors.
They were
Yeah.
how did they get away with that?
They didn't.
They did. I mean, yeah.
They went to jail. Or I don't know. They went to jail.
Were they doing it before the acquisition, or did they do it because they thought they were
We don't know.
yeah.
We don't know. There have been cases where an individual at one of the organizations was purposefully crashing the system within a 2-hour period midday. Yeah. And it was a key system for that location. Yeah, so there are some shenanigans. Definitely there are certain gray areas during due diligence where, the company being acquired can't disclose due to legal issues or lingering legal issues. And typically they bond those as part of the deal, or they say, this is a carve out, we can't talk about it. But we're going to carve out this value, and they give the attorneys as much information as they can and call it a day. So there are a lot of moving pieces during the deal.
Let me go back to those employees that were stealing. Now, was that accounted for somehow? Say, hey, they put a financial number on the what was lost, and they said, was the seller responsible for that in the price somehow, or was that just absorbed in later?
I can't talk to that specific deal, but I can talk in generalities.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Sometimes there's in some of the larger acquisitions, there's a contingency. Okay, and those are put into a contingency and marked against the contingency post deal. So that's
is that a time frame within 12 months or within
Yeah, I mean,
24 months? Yeah.
every single legal agreement always has
Sunset date on it. Yeah.
a sunset date on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. And did you ever involved with one that where it was unwound? They unwinded it to an acquisition?
I've been in 2 acquisitions where it 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 fell apart. Yeah.
Yeah. What were the
Um,
reasons there?
uh, the first one was just that the organization was moving into a market, and it was viewed as an opportunity by the acquirer, and the market didn't prove out. Um, and so there wasn't money at the end of the rainbow bow for that acquisition. The second one was
Well,
just
let
that.
me go to that. So they
Yeah,
were, I don't know what the size was. Let's say it's a $10 million business and they're
yeah,
acquiring it, and it's a profitable business, but you bought it because you thought you could put your products through that channel too, or vice
that,
versa, or what was
yeah.
it?
So no, it was a technology purchase, and the organization was entering a market, and it turned out that the driver behind the acquisition just really didn't have the cash flow that would give that yield. And so this company was making a pivot to a new market, and that new market was enticing, but once the numbers were once the numbers were checked against the potential of that market, it just
It
didn't.
didn't prove out to be true. There
Yeah,
wasn't a real
yeah,
market. Yeah. So they were
yeah,
in some kind of mature market that was probably, going away at some point, losing its profitability, trying to get into a new market and saying, hey, this is fantastic. We're going to hit a new market. It's going to be, 3 times as large, but that didn't turn out to be true.
yeah. And then I experienced the same thing as well. I was going to buy a technology and a couple of engineers that had some technology in the 3D printing business,
Yeah. Yeah.
and this was 2013, 14, right in there. So it was early, and I felt that they were going in the right direction, and I ended up sizing the market, and what they had was enticing, and I ended up sizing the market, and it just didn't make financial sense to get there. And I had spent a lot of time. I mean, and I think that happens more often than not, especially when you're looking at a company or you're looking at somebody very small and just, even making a VC investment, where you go, okay, or an angel investment in this case, and that company kind of was was me coming in as an angel and running it, kind of like one of your recent podcasts where you're the money and the experience, and they've got something. But market sizing, my calculation on the market sizing wasn't worth it.
That's
I
a
did.
tough call to make because you could have a great business, 10, $25 million, and it's moving along, but it only growing at 5 to 8% a year. And there's nothing you could do if you bought it. It's like, oh, if I came in and I did this to it and this to it, organically, it's just not going to grow because the market, there's no market need for.
Actually, I think there are a lot of PE guys that look for 5 to 8%,
Yeah.
and understand that they're going to get to, they're hoping for 10 or they're hoping for 15, and as a backstop to that, they're looking to either roll it into other companies that they've got, or go in and cut costs, or load it up with debt, like a typical, a frequent PE move, and go on down the road, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, I get that. I mean, you
yeah,
can say, hey, I got this $25 million company. It's growing 5% per year. And organically, I'm just not going to see any more. Maybe it's a regional thing.
yeah,
Maybe it's whatever it is. It's the limitations. But the only really way to go is to buy another company doing $25 million at 8%. Now I have a $50 million company.
yeah. And I think the other thing to look at is, looking at companies, they're limping along, and you identify that there's just they're ripe for a change in management. Okay. They're just getting too comfortable. It's like the old sales guys, that have been someplace for too long, and they're just taking their paycheck home, and they're not
No new ideas.
swinging for the fences, right?
Yeah.
They somewhere along the line they get comfortable, and they're not swinging for the fences. That's more companies than I. If those companies could be easily identified, there'd be more companies for sale. There'd be more companies being acquired and assimilated.
Well, I guess
think.
the key is to find somebody that's stagnant or exhausted and just keep asking them. And it's a numbers game. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that there are a few folks down here in San Diego that market primarily to organizations that have had family management. I know that's an attractive business for them. They look for family-owned businesses where, it's questionable on whether or not the kids stay with the business, and they're not really expensive businesses, but they're just cash earners, and no real big changes as a result of coming with that. But there's all sorts of opportunities out there.
Yeah.
So
Have you ever been involved with an acquisition that was in a distress situation and the person acquiring it was kind of a turnaround artist?
I think the lot. So I've done due diligence for some PE guys, and that's their principal thinking usually. I think there are a lot of PE guys that look for distressed businesses. I can't say whether or not the ones I've worked with thought that they were distressed. That word typically doesn't.
Well, let's say it's not profitable.
Yeah, there are a lot of
only
businesses
because of and the acquirer goes, well, I can fix that.
Yeah, there are a lot of unprofitable or stagnant businesses out there. I just don't think the term distressed is one that's thrown around a lot, except by MBAs.
Okay.
And people that write business articles, right? I don't look at any business as being distressed. I look at every business as an opportunity, and I think that's where you have to keep your head. So.
Yeah. Well, do you have, let's say, a rule book, operating procedures when you come in and say that this is the first thing I do? Like if you were Captain Sully and you lose 2 engines, you pull out the operating manual and this is what you do.
Well, so quite certainly on the assimilation side, I've got a run book, and there's not a lot of those books out there. There's a tome by some former Price Waterhouse Cooper employees. That's an old name, right? But they wrote a tome years ago on the role between, well, assimilation and due diligence and checklists and processes and stuff like that. I tend to look at the sales side first and what the market is. I've been, I'd say, marginally successful. I got involved in one a little while ago, that I ended up just turning them on to some VCs that I knew, and I helped them through getting funding. They weren't a company. I liked them a lot. They just weren't a company I wanted to work with, as an employee or as a leader, and ended up just saying, listen, I this is not for me, but I want to help you. And I like you guys a lot, and I like where you're going. I like your market. You need money. Let's get you some money.
Yeah.
And in that regard, it was just cleaning up some things, and that their VC pitch was successful, and the VCs that they got in front of ended up really, I don't know how they did this, but they really targeted the organization's deficiencies quite well. And out of the blue, they targeted the deficiencies. I don't know how they
And then you didn't
understood.
see this, or you just
No, I knew what they were, but typically you don't disclose everything. You kind of go, we're working on this area, and some of the or these areas, and these VCs came in, and they're it's like they had an insider, and we know they didn't. Um, it was amazing, and it just turned out to be for their board
a good
you know,
investment. Yeah.
one of the update questions that they ended up having every quarter to make sure the company was overcoming the deficiency. So
Yeah. I mean, well, look at you. You picked the right VC. There's 1,000 out there, and you picked the right one that saw that. So good for you.
yeah, I was stunned. And I pulled them aside afterwards, like, are you reading people's minds? Jesus, where'd that come from? And they're like, it's just kind of random. I just, it was kind of a natural follow-on question. It's like, wow, okay.
So what was the question that they asked that they got to the real
Accounting controls.
accounting
So
controls?
yeah, it was really, yeah, they had had somebody working in a senior position that had taken some money from them.
Ah,
So yeah.
well, that never helps, does it? And they
No.
identified that early on, or how deep did they go and time go by before they go, yeah, we can fix this by taking that guy out?
They asked a fairly pointed question on because they had a lot of cash moving through the business, and they asked, well, how do you do, what kind of controls do you have in place? And then they said, you know, within the last 3 years, have you had any instances where somebody's taken money? And yeah, that's when they disclosed.
Wow.
And they hadn't really, in my opinion, corrected the situation fully. I had made some recommendations, and they hadn't taken them on yet. So
Asking the
they
right
did.
questions.
They did
Well, they
after.
already knew the answer to it. They just had to ask the right questions. I don't think they were exploring. And let me ask you, I don't have a lot of time left with you, but with the acquisitions that you were involved when they acquired companies, how did each one of those, did it increase shareholder value for the investors and for shareholders, all of them?
One was Unwound, which you asked me about.
Yeah.
It was all about cultural fit, and it was unwound after probably about 6 or 8 months. And that company, I was directly involved in that, and that company ended up vaporizing 3-4 months later.
Just like totally bankrupt, just going away.
Yeah. They just, yeah. So they had there was something else going on that we didn't really know, and those, it turned out that their employees were not happy with the company that we were acquiring, and
So it's
it
like
definitely.
Black Rifle Coffee trying to purchase Patagonia. It's not going to work out.
Right. And so that unwound. And I got to ask you, what was the question again?
Oh, it was about the acquisitions you're involved with and did increasing shareholder value. So already one of them was unwound and the company blew up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say the IBM acquisition of the company I put in front of them. You know, when you're dealing with a large technology company, I mean, they orphan products or they assimilate products into their own product suite. And so, in that regard, they just bought the technology and I think, ended up integrating the other people into the global organization,
Yeah, I see that
which is
makes sense.
very, yeah. So
An
that's a very,
acquihire. Yeah.
what, well, that wasn't quite an acquihire. It was actually a technology play. It just turned out to be cheap money on all sides. So ROI there, yeah, the Megit one, obviously, since they're being acquired by Parker Hannifin 3 years later, that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, that's a good one. That
And they
added.
spent, yeah, they spent a lot of money. I mean, we're not talking about trivial assimilations. It costs millions of dollars to integrate an assembly plant into an existing ecosystem of plants. When you see moves like that, it's a multi-year, multi-million-dollar process. That you just hope. I personally, I enjoyed the hell out of that.
Yeah.
You know, primarily because it is like, what possible experience could I have that would allow me to up my game plus leverage, you know, my 30 years of experience in business and IT. You can't have a better experience than that. And if
Oh, I
if you
bet.
still enjoy the business and still like doing that kind of thing, there is no better opportunity.
You were in the
Um,
arena, as they say, in the arena. Yeah.
yeah, I enjoyed the hell out of it.
Yeah.
So
What are you
yeah.
curious about now? I mean, what do you want to? Do you want to work by your own businesses or be a part of that? Or
I really love um, helping companies do due diligence, try to understand a market, try to understand another business, see whether or not it's a suitable target, and kind of identify the life cycle. So what I like is I've had this opportunity with a couple PE guys where they're going, we're looking at these guys, we want you to come in with us and gain your viewpoint on whether or not it's a good buy. And I've enjoyed doing that. And
yeah,
I don't wear an auditor's hat per se. It's just kind of like, well, tell me about this, and there's a new thing happening. Workplaces are changing, and a lot of organizations are having to, like change their digital transformation process to accommodate differences in the way people buy.
yeah,
And that's a big thing. And there are people starting to work in that arena. Large organizations and small are having to deal with different buyer mentalities where new buyers don't want, you know, um, to be lunched and dined, once a month. They want to be provided enough information to make an affirmative purchase decision. So those kind of things are things I'm thinking about with with acquisitions, and that's kind of pulling in different different experiences I've had, and just going, okay, there are buyer behavior changes happening right now. There's worker behavior changes right now. You know, there's massive labor shortages everywhere. How are companies dealing with that? What are they doing to make their environment better? Are they ponying up more cash, or are they doing creative things? I heard something interesting this week, as a matter of fact, where because of the increase in prices, they're looking at giving debit cards to employees that have a longer than 20-mile commute to work. Okay, where the company is paying for the increase in gas prices in order to keep employee,
Yeah,
to
because
have
if they don't do
employee
that, it's right out of their paycheck. Yeah.
it's coming right out of their paycheck, and some companies are recognizing that, and I think that's a cool thing. So companies are getting creative, and workplaces are changing, and buyer behaviors are changing as a result. They're working from home. It's like, okay, my customer went from being in this corporate office to working from home. Well, I can't, drive 40 miles to their house and take them out for lunch, right? So how am I going to tell them about the product? What part of that is your digital strategy? And so I think there's some education for people that acquire companies to start thinking about. It's not just we're buying this company. There's actually new business challenges coming as a result of these changes in COVID and even gas prices now. And
Yeah.
so all of that's interesting to me.
Jack, I want to thank you very much for the time. I really appreciate sharing your knowledge and wisdom and how you did it with these 7 acquisitions and being a guest on Top M&A Entrepreneurs. So thank you so much, Jack.
My pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Great questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye now.